And the church silent auction closes now. As we gather, whether here or at our homes for this time, I invite you to take a few smooth breaths to make your body 10% more comfortable, or more if you can manage. To let the to-do list of your Sunday afternoon be set aside, at least for now. It'll be there for you in an hour or so. And just be in this place, in this time, together. Come, let us gather. Come, let us worship together.
I'm Gordon Bolar, a member of the Sunday Services Committee and also a member of People's Church. We are a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So I'd like to welcome each and every one of you this morning, and I don't say that offhandedly or without intention and meaning. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, someone asked me, well, I don't know much about People's Church or Unitarian Universalism. What is your typical member? And I said, no. I can't tell you who that is. I can tell you that we embrace a principle of diversity and we honor the dignity and worth of every single individual. But I can't give you any demographic, cookie cutter information that might be used in some marketing plan. It's just absurd. You know, as I look around the room, I can see that reflected. Today, in our sermon, in our service, in the music, in the readings, we're going to see that really reinforced. And we're going to learn how that diversity, those differences, are our strength here at People's Church. So welcome, each and every one of you, to People's Church.
And a few announcements as we begin. So for the auction, if you are here in person at church today, you can collect your winnings and make payments towards those winnings in the foyer after the service. If you aren't here in person, we will be in touch with you shortly. The 5th and 6th grade OWL class that was scheduled for after church today has been canceled as the facilitators are sick. it will be rescheduled and people will be in touch. But we have another program after church today. The Green Sanctuary Committee invites you to join us following the service to learn from Denise Keel, Executive Director of the Michigan Climate Action Network, in the first in our series of climate conversations. We welcome the League of Women Voters of Kalamazoo area as a co-sponsor of these events. So come to room 19, which is the big room at the top of the stairs, to join for a light lunch. The conversation will begin around 12:30, and Denise will bring us up to date about the state of climate justice in Michigan, recently adopted legislation, and what to expect during the coming year. Next Sunday, we are hosting a substance use disorder and overdose prevention training following the service. Finally, we've had to postpone this twice due to illness and weather. This will include a chance to learn more about the science of addiction and to be trained to administer Narcan, which is a medicine that can save the life of someone who's overdosed on opioids. It is a good thing to be able to have that, to be able to protect our neighbors. About a month from now, Isaac, the congregation-based community organizing group that we are a part of, is hosting a virtual event with Layla Saad, the author of Me and White Supremacy. It's on Saturday afternoon, March 16th, and now is the time to start engaging with that work to have a deeper understanding of that conversation. So we have the book and the journal that goes along with it in our foyer, and there's an online sign-up that went out in the weekly email as well. If you take copies of the books, we ask you to give what you can. Isaac and our social justice program will cover the balance. And personally, this is a book that I checked out of the library a while ago and let sit on my shelf for about 18 months before I opened it for the first time, and finally returned it. And then 2 weeks later, Isaac announced that they would be doing this reading group. So I am excited to have an excuse to finally put my nose into this good and important work. I hope you join me. And as we begin, a content note. So in the sermon today, I'm going to be talking about the eugenics movement, and it's really racist and really classist and ableist and sexist and violent and really all of the other awful things you can imagine. So if that is not what you need from our service this morning, that is fine, and I invite you to take care of yourself, okay? The rest of the service will not be quite as much of a downer, so you can stay for those parts if you like. Okay, now I invite you into whatever posture helps you sing your best, and we will have our opening song.
Now let us sing, 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 sing. Now let us sing, 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 sing. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Sing to the power of the faith within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of the faith within. Pick it up a little. up your voice, lift up your voice. Be not afraid. Sing to the power of the joy within.
As we prepare to light our chalice this morning, I invite Reagan to come forward and help with that activity. And if you're lighting a chalice at home, you're encouraged to type in the chat box, a chalice is lit or lighted in your neighborhood. Thank you, Reagan. Go ahead. Our chalice reading is from Cindy Feskin. Excuse me. We are all capable in different ways with various strengths and talents. We are all holy, part of the universe and the interdependent web. We light this chalice, cherishing our differences and holding each other in sacredness.
In addition to our chalice flame here at People's Church, there are chalices kindled in the Landing Apartments and in Parkview Hills today, and in Evergreen North in Oshtemo. What a gift that we can all be together in time, even when we can't be together in place. Now I would like to invite our young people forward for a story. Hello, I am so glad all of you are with us today. This is Dorothy and this is Leia. So our story today comes from the Yoruba people of West Africa. And it is a story about Eshu, who is a trickster god. Do you guys know what a trickster is?
Yeah.
Who knows what a trickster is? Oh, yeah, what do you?
It's someone who plays tricks a lot.
Someone who plays tricks a lot. Anything to add?
Yes, and there's ghosts that tricks too. Ghosts.
Ghosts are sometimes tricksters. Yeah, so it's tricksters. Okay, what else?
A trickster is somebody who tries to deceive people almost, doesn't tell the truth.
Oh, doesn't tell the truth.
A trickster is someone who it sounds like plays tricks on nature.
Yep, a trickster plays tricks on people, and a trickster god often has a reason for playing tricks on people that the people might not understand in the moment. Leah, do you have another thought?
Because they thought that if they played tricks, they could try to make them play with them.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Well, okay. So in this story, it begins like this, and there's lots of different versions of this story, but one day, the god Eshu went walking through the village. Oh, here comes Eshu. And Eshu was wearing his favorite hat. And after Eshu went walking through the village, the people on one side of the village, or somebody on one side of the village said, "Oh, that god was wearing the most wonderful red hat I've ever seen." And the people on the other side said, "No, it was great to see him, but he was wearing a black hat." And these people did not really listen to each other. They started yelling. What color hat did the people over here see? Red. And over here, what did you see? Okay. Can we yell this a little bit? Let's have a fight. Oh, beautiful. And so after a while, this got so bad that the people were thinking that they should just form different villages because they could not be around somebody who had such a wrong opinion about what color God's hat was. Isn't that kind of extreme? And so, Eshu saw what was happening, and Eshu decided to go for another walk through the village. And this time, what did Eshu do? Let's watch. Oh, Eshu spun a little bit.
Me.
Yeah? Oh, you want to spin a little bit too? Oh, that's how you walk through the village? I love it. Red and black too. And the people realized, oh, Eshu was wearing a hat that was red and black. Maybe we should listen to each other a little bit as opposed to just yelling. Maybe there's wisdom that we don't know because we can't see everything because we're just people and we couldn't even see the other side of the hat. So maybe we should be humble and realize what we don't know, at least ask some questions before we start yelling at each other. So why do you think Eshu played that trick on the village? Any ideas?
Me.
Yeah.
See how much they trust people.
Oh, to see if people would trust each other? Yeah?
Maybe to like see that they're just seeing something from a different perspective.
They're just seeing things from different perspectives. What do you think, Ollie?
Me, they're like a doctor.
Yeah?
And I got and I just.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Because he wanted to mess with them.
He wanted to mess with them. I mean, he was a trickster god, so he could have taught this lesson probably in ways that involved less yelling, but that's kind of how he liked to operate, make people have big feelings. But you probably learned the lesson a little bit better, right? Yeah. Well, thank you all for being part of this storytelling with me. Thank you to Forrest for your acting. And and now we are going to sing the song, and you guys are going to go to class. It's time for class now, Ollie. I'll walk with you. Yep.
Go forth in peace in search of wisdom, with love to guide you on your way.
Which class are you in?
Joy of life surround you wherever you may go. Go forth in peace in search of wisdom, with love to guide you on your way. And may the joy of life surround you wherever you may go.
People's people are generous people. And I usually tell some grand, or not grand, but at least big public story in this spot. But over the last few weeks, I've just been struck by how people in this community care for one another in quiet ways. They give each other rides or meals. They visit one another when they're sick. They help people face challenges or get connected to the resources they might need to find stable housing or figure out medical challenges. And of course, for privacy reasons, I'm not going to tell any of those detailed stories. But I see it, and I know I only see a fraction of it because you all are caring and supporting one another in all of these different ways. And if you're in need of more care and more support, let me know. Or if you have capacity to give more, let me know, and we will connect you. So this is the point in our service where I ask you to continue to be the generous people that you are. The offering will now be received.
Join me in giving thanks for all that sustains us. From the countless gifts we have each been given, gifts of life and love and sustenance, we bring these small portions to share in the works of love, which none of us can accomplish alone.
One of the ways we care for one another here is by taking time when we gather on Sundays to share the joys and the sorrows and the other important milestones in our lives. If you have something you wish to share and you're on Zoom, I invite you to type it into the chat box and attach your name if it's not obvious from your username who you are. If you're with us in person, I invite you to come forward, place a stone in our bowl of water, speak briefly, and share your name. I now place a few more stones for the joy and the sorrow we are holding quietly in our hearts today, the joy and sorrow in our wider community and our wider world. Sources of reason and radiance, sources of courage and compassion, keep watch with those who work or watch or weep this day. May the suffering be soothed. May the weary find rest. May the sick be tended. May the dying and those who love them find peace. May the joyous be shielded. And may all of us know we are wrapped in a love that surrounds us always, a web that connects us to all that exists. Spirit of life and love, known by many names and yet fully known by none, we give thanks for this time and this place of renewal. We give thanks for the ability to begin again after the disaster, after the tragedy, after the loss, after meeting the challenge set before us. Grant us the courage to continue on the journey, the courage to speak up for the well-being of others and ourselves and the planet. May we forgive each other when our courage falls short. And may we try again. Grant us hearts to love boldly, to embody our faith and our values in living words and deeds. May our hearts open to embrace humility, grace, and reconciliation. Grant us the ability to learn and grow, to let the spirit of love and truth work its transformation upon us and within us. Grant us the spirit of hospitality, the willingness to sustain a fit dwelling place for the holy that resides in all being. Grant us a sense of being at peace in the world, even as we are in motion. Let us cultivate together the strength to welcome every kind of gift and all manner of ways to be on the journey together. To this we add the silent prayers of our hearts. Blessed be.
Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
For our first reading this morning, I read from the prose of Lulu Miller, Why Fish Don't Exist. What does Darwin say is the best way of building a strong species, of allowing it to endure into the future, to withstand the blows of chaos in all her mighty forms? Flood, drought, rising sea levels, fluctuating temperatures, invasions of competitors, predators, pests, variation. Variation in genes and hence in behavior and physical traits. Homogeneity is a death sentence. To rid a species of its mutants and outliers is to make that species dangerously vulnerable to the elements. In nearly every chapter of Origin, Darwin hails the power of variation. He marvels over how diverse gene pools are healthier, stronger, how intercrossing between different types of individuals gives more vigor and fertility to their offspring, how even worms and plants can produce perfect replicas of themselves, are equipped for sex, for introducing varieties back into the gene pool. Diversify your genetic portfolio would be another way of saying it. You never know which traits could prove useful as conditions change. Darwin even goes out of his way to warn against meddling. The danger, as he sees it, is the fallibility of the human eye, our inability to comprehend complexity. Traits that might seem abhorrent to our ideas of fitness could actually be beneficial to a species or ecosystem, or could in time become beneficial as conditions change. It was that ungainly neck that gave the giraffe an edge over its competitors. The seeming dead weight of blubber that allowed the seal to thrive in advancing cold. The divergent human brain that might hold the key to inventions, discoveries, and revolutions that the majority is unable to fathom. Consider the case of cyanobacteria, a tiny green speck in the sea, so insignificant to the human eye that for centuries we didn't even have a name for it. Until one day in 1980, when scientists accidentally discovered it was producing a significant portion of the oxygen we breathe. Now we revere it, this tiny green speck, Prochlorococcus marinus. We fight to protect it. This was the kind of scenario that Darwin prophesied. Why, he warned so unambiguously, against attempting to rank Earth's bounty. Which group can prevail? No man can predict. And this wariness, this humility, this reverence for an ecological complexity that defies human comprehension is, in fact, a very old idea. It's a basic philosophical concept, sometimes called the dandelion principle. In some contexts, a dandelion might be considered a weed to be culled. In others, it's a valuable medicinal herb to be cultivated. The eugenicists fail to consider this very simple principle of relativity. By trying to cull the gene pool of its indispensable variety, they were, in fact, foiling their very best shot of building a master race.
I cannot prove to you that I am/we are human by Julian Jamaica Soto. I cannot prove to you that I am a person, but you can hold my hand, cool and dry while we pray, or just breathe, ragged breaths catching on our aching ribs. I cannot prove to you that brown skin is holy, that black skin is sacred, but you can know it, luminous and irrepressible, the tabernacle of your own liberation. I cannot even prove to you that every queer body, every trans and NB body, every ace and bisexual body sings back to the universe its immense generative power of yes. I cannot prove to you with quadratic certainty that what a disabled body holds is a story of wisdom beyond perfection, like a red sun emerging from behind a cloud of dust. So the answers that I have for a country hacking up a death rattle and a democracy with the wheezing, waxy pallor are about our courage to love, our desperation not only for survival, but also to tread above the worst of our collective nature, to get each other free, unashamed that there came a day when we were willing to risk looking foolish to simply stay together and alive. Thank you, Gordon. My IQ by Ani DeFranco. When I was 4 years old, they tried to test my IQ. They showed me a picture of 3 oranges and a pear. They said, which one is different? It does not belong. They taught me difference is wrong. But when I was 13 years old, I woke up one morning thighs covered in blood like a war, like a warning that I live in a breakable, takeable body, an ever increasingly valuable body, that someone had come in the night to replace me, to face me. See, my body is borrowed. Yeah, I got it on loan for the time between my mom and some maggots. I don't need anyone to hold me. I can hold my own. I got highways for stretch marks. See where I've grown. I sing sometimes like my life is at stake because you're only as loud as the noises you make. I'm learning to laugh as hard as I can listen because silence is violence in women and poor people. If more people were screaming, then I could relax. But a good brain ain't diddly if you don't have the facts. We live in a breakable, takeable world, an ever available, possible world. And we can make music like we can make do. Genius is in a backbeat to nothing if you're dancing, especially something stupid like IQ. For every lie I unlearn, I learn something new. I sing sometimes for the war that I fight, because every tool is a weapon if you hold it right.
You are invited to join us in song.
Every tool is a weapon if you hold it right. Last week, our service was about Charles Darwin and evolution. And evolution is a glorious tool for understanding how the world is as it is, and for awe. The truth that we are all descended from one universal common ancestor 4 billion years ago fills me with wonder. And as the singer-songwriter Ani DeFranco reminds us in the poem I just read, every tool is a weapon if you hold it right. And evolution is no different. In the first generations after the idea of evolution was published, more modern ideas about genetics and inheritance were understood, and scientists now understood how traits were passed from parent to child and how that could lead to a shift in entire species over time. And then they got evil with those ideas, more or less. By the early years of the last century, people took these ideas from science and wanted to apply them to human populations. In our country, there was a movement to selectively breed humans to make people closer to what people in power considered ideal. Their ideal was white, middle and upper class, neurotypical, physically able, people who engaged in sexual activity that those in power thought was acceptable, Protestant, English-speaking, with no criminal history, no history of addictions of any kind, no history of being sexually assaulted, with their ancestry traced to Northern or Western Europe. Anyone else should not have children. This was called the eugenics movement, and the word eugenics comes from ancient Greek words that roughly translate to good breeding. And the eugenics movement swept through our country. In the early years of the last century, 33 states passed eugenics laws that allowed state government officials to forcibly sterilize people that they thought were not worthy of having children. Michigan was the first state to introduce this legislation in 1897, though it did not pass for several decades. And there are about 4,000 documented cases of Michiganders forcibly sterilized by the state. Preventing people from having children wasn't all that the eugenics movement pursued. Other parts of this movement were restrictions on immigration, so only people from Northern and Western Europe had free access as immigrants, institutionalizing people with mental or physical differences in sex-segregated facilities, and encouraging married women who fit inside the tiny box that the eugenicist deemed fit to have as many children as possible. Fitter family contests became regular features at state fair. So alongside the judging of cattle and sheep and pies and all of the things we are used to seeing at state fairs, there would be contests for white families to enter to see who was the best from the eugenics perspective. So they would be judged on their looks, their IQ scores, and how much money they had. And they would get a blue ribbon alongside the pie or the sheep. It's an awful history. And it's worth remembering. And it's worth remembering here today because many of the leaders of the eugenics movement were Unitarians and Universalists. In the early years of the last century, eugenics was aligned with a lot of progressive causes in a way that I find it hard to wrap my mind around, but it was true then. So people who were deeply involved in women's suffrage and fight for racial equality and pacifism were also eugenicists. A comprehensive history is beyond what I can do today. Instead, I'm going to share with you some parts of the Unitarian and Universalist role in this movement of control and oppression. David Starr Jordan was the first president of Stanford University, and he was raised Universalist. He was a leading fish biologist. The book that Gordon read from earlier, Why Fish Don't Exist, is a biography of him and some other things. It's an incredible piece of writing. And he was also a deeply committed eugenicist. In 1902, he published a book with this odious title, The Blood of the Nation, a study of the decay of races through the survival of the unfit, which advocated for eugenics policies to shift the demographics of this country. And it was published by Beacon Press, which is the Unitarian publishing house. Beacon Press went on to publish 19 more eugenics books by this author alone. This was an idea that institutionally our ancestors wanted to spread. He was their bestseller and a frequent speaker at Unitarian congregations spreading this message. John Haynes Holmes was a leading Unitarian minister of the era and deeply committed to making the world a better place. He was a co-founder of both the NAACP, the National Organization for the Advancement of Colored People, one of the leading civil rights organizations, and the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, which works to promote and protect First Amendment freedoms. He's one that within Unitarian Universalist circles, at least the nerds like me who pay attention to the history, we claim him as a hero. I received a fellowship named in his honor when I was in seminary, and that was a big deal. But in addition to this good, he was also a vocal eugenicist. It was his practice, and he encouraged other Unitarian ministers as well to perform both physical and mental examinations on couples who asked him to marry them, to make sure that they were good enough, in his estimation, to reproduce. If couples didn't have what he was looking for, he would refuse to marry them. And this was a time before anyone could just hop on the internet and get an internet ordination and be legally mandated or legally allowed to officiate weddings. So this was a significant barrier. This was a big deal, that he was deciding who couldn't marry, and at least in his understanding, that meant who could or could not reproduce. Meanwhile, the leading eugenicist organizations had sermon contests on the topic of better breeding, and the Unitarians and the Universalists were frequent winners. Eugenics was not a fringe element within our faith or society more broadly 100 years ago. This was a mainstream idea. Another story. In 1924, officials in the state of Virginia wanted to sterilize Carrie Buck. Buck was a girl who was raised in foster care, and after repeated sexual assaults from the nephew of her foster parents, she became pregnant and gave birth to a child. And the state then wanted to institutionalize her and sterilize her on the basis of her sexual behavior. Now, this was a child who was assaulted, right? And she refused. She did not want that for herself and her body. She found a lawyer. Her case made it to the Supreme Court. And at that point, there were two Unitarians sitting on the Supreme Court, Oliver Wendell Holmes and William Howard Taft. So this was after his presidency has ended. He went on the Supreme Court, and then he became the president of the National Unitarian Conference, one of the predecessor organizations of our Unitarian Universalist Association. By an 8-to-1 majority, the US Supreme Court held that states had the right to sterilize people that they deemed unfit. Carrie Buck lost her case. She was forcibly institutionalized and sterilized, and both of the Unitarians voted with the majority, with Oliver Wendell Holmes writing the majority opinion. And in an earlier draft of this sermon, I had some of that opinion in here, but I realized it was just too gross and too ableist to speak from our pulpit, and I just couldn't do it. But if you really want to feel some horror, I invite you to go look at it, because wow. So this Supreme Court case, which is called Buck versus Bell, has never been overturned. And states have continued to coercively or forcibly sterilize people, though not in the numbers of that era. Until the 1970s, women in some states were required to be sterilized before they could receive public assistance for themselves or their children. And now most coercive sterilizations happen to people who are incarcerated. But it is still happening. There are people alive, not a small number, who've been forcibly sterilized by the state. Every tool is a weapon if you hold it right. Every tool is a weapon if you hold it right. In this same era, while the eugenics movement was was expanding, was expansive, was mainstream, more modern and more effective methods of birth control began to be widely distributed. Modern and effective methods of birth control are a gift to this world and to so many of our lives. I am so grateful. And in some of their earliest decades in this country, they were also weapons. The early leaders of the birth control movement in this country largely focused their public rhetoric and much of their operations and most of their fundraising on controlling birth rates among poor people, immigrants, people who didn't speak English, Black people, and other people of color. The first clinics were in poor neighborhoods. And while a lot of people were grateful for these new tools to take better control over their body, to decide if and when they would have children, it was also often done without a lot of consent, with not a lot of education or understanding. The early birth control advocates, including Margaret Sanger, the founder of one of the organizations that became Planned Parenthood, was part of the eugenics movement. The Universalists were one of the first Christian denominations to support the use of modern birth control methods, things like diaphragms and condoms and surgical sterilizations. And now in our tradition, we talk about access to this care as part of an individual's right of conscience, about having control over one's body and one's future. But that was not how our religious ancestors spoke about it. In their public statements, this mostly white, mostly Anglo-Saxon, mostly native-born denomination supported birth control because they wanted people who were not like them to use it so we could better the race, which is, ugh. So I bet by this point we're all thinking, this sounds a lot like Nazi Germany, doesn't it? With racist policies and mass organized killings of people who were Jewish or Roma or homosexual or disabled. And you would be right. A lot of the eugenics practices of the Nazis in Germany were inspired by this American movement. American eugenicists proudly sent their promotional materials and their grand plans off to Germany. And some American foundations even funded early efforts of eugenics projects after the Nazis took power. It's an awful history. Awful isn't a strong enough word for this stuff. And the eugenics practices of the Nazis were what ended the mainstream American eugenics movements. As the war ended, as people saw the death camps and the concentration camps, they saw the logical extension of their policies were mass murder. And they realized how inhumane and how awful it was. Of course, there are echoes of the eugenics movement, mostly on the political right now. They can be heard in former President Donald Trump saying that immigrants are poisoning the blood of our nation, in the far-right Great Replacement conspiracy theory that says the wrong Americans are having babies too fast. And in one of the richest men in the world, Elon Musk, having 9 children and encouraging other people like him, which I think means white and rich, to also have lots of children. This is a hard one, right? And I think this part of American history and our Unitarian Universalist history is worthy of our attention. I'm not asking you to feel guilty. None of us were there sterilizing people without their consent. None of us were publishing the awful books or spreading these ideas. This is more an invitation to humility. There are very few people who wake up each morning thinking, how can I make the world worse? That was not what the eugenicists thought they were doing, and yet they made things worse. They sacrificed the well-being, the autonomy, the agency of human beings with as much inherent worth as anyone on an altar of a white supremacist ideal. They couldn't fathom poor people or immigrants or people of color or disabled people as humans worthy of care and respect. capable of making their own decisions. They did not envision a world where all flourish with dignity and worth, but a world where the only people who existed looked and acted exactly like they do. That is not a beloved community. Both Darwin originally and Unitarian Universalists today know that diversity is a gift. Biologically, diversity makes a species better able to adapt to challenges and changes. As Gordon read earlier, even some species of worms and plants that can reproduce perfect replicas of themselves are also able to reproduce sexually, because we need that variation to survive. Every species needs that if we are going to survive. And today, about 100 years after the height of the eugenics movement, our Unitarian Universalist tradition has grown and stretched itself enough to have a very different idea about how the world should be. Our hearts and minds have been expanded by teachers both inside and outside of our tradition, and we do not seek a world where only certain sorts of people thrive. People who just happen to share all of the social and physical attributes of the people with the most power. Diversity is a gift. It is a theological gift. The red hat and black hat people, when they talk to each other, come to an understanding that they never would have had alone. That God's hat has two colors, not just one. We need people in this world with all sorts of bodies, all sorts of brains, all sorts of identities and experiences in this world. We are better for it. As Reverend Julian Jamaica Soto writes in the poem I read earlier, Julian is a Unitarian Universalist minister and the executive director of Trust, which is Transgender Religious Professional Unitarian Universalists Together, which is a group that supports and advocates for trans musicians, religious educators, and clergy in our tradition. They wrote in the poem I read earlier, "Black skin is holy. Brown skin is sacred. Every queer body, every trans and NB body, every ace and bisexual body sings back to the universe its own immense generative power of yes. A disabled body holds a story of wisdom beyond perfection, like a red sun emerging from behind a cloud of dust. Wisdom beyond perfection. This is what history invites us to, because perfection is always an illusion and an impossibility in this world that is baffling and beautiful. Perfection, the voice of perfection, the impulse towards perfection, calls us to try to control people, non-human animals, ecosystems, all of which we might now have the coercive power to control as humans, but we do not have and cannot have the wisdom to control others in this way. We do not have the wisdom for that work. Over the last 100 years, our tradition has learned so much more about our own limitations as humans. We used to have a very high theological anthropology. That's what they call how we view human nature, that humans were getting better onward and upward forever. And we know that we're pretty good, but we're not perfect. We don't know everything, and we can't know everything. We are learning the ways we are not above the world, set apart from it, trying to control it, but part of it. We are learning the ways we do not have the vision or the wisdom to wield all of the power that we have. We are still learning, and we might always be learning, that there's wisdom that we will just never have. And as we lean into this humility, this recognition of our own limitations, we realize we cannot and should not be imposing our will on other beings through coercive power. We do not know what's best for someone else. Even if there is that tiny voice in our back of our head saying, I know, I should be in charge of your life because I could do it so much better. It's not actually true. It's not. This is something I will probably always be learning. Maybe you too. The way that we show up and live our values and live out love best is to allow others to make their choices. Maybe you're with me in this struggle to release my image of what would be perfect and try to control it all and just recognize there is a wisdom that we all have access to collectively, but none of us can see and hold fully as individuals. So I catch glimpses around here and in the wider world of people showing up for one another and beyond with humility rather than that hubris, that control, that I know best of the eugenicists. As many of us know, our congregation has been partnering with others to resettle refugees from Syria and then Afghanistan for about 8 years now. We have welcomed people who are unlike us in many ways and similar to us in some to this country, listened to their needs, and tried to help them make their way in the world as best as we can. Last Sunday, about 20 of you attended an LGBTQ plus 101 and pronouns training, seeking to understand and better show care for people who might be different from you. That is what it looks like to practice humility, to ask questions, to know we don't actually know everything, to keep learning. That's what it looks like to live out our values as we currently understand them. We all are creating a new way in our faith to live it with humility and with care. So may we know this awful history and chart a new path for ourselves and our world. May we practice humility and celebrate difference. May we seek and find that wisdom that is beyond perfection and control. May it be so. May we make it so. Amen.
I invite you to rise, embody your spirit one last time to sing our closing song together. We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high
history can sometimes numb us, right? The world has been and continues to be so awful in so many ways. But the only good thing about all of the badness that I know is that means there are so many opportunities to make it a little bit better. So let us go out with humility and care and live our faith in a world that needs our message and our care. Let us go in faith, go in peace, and go in love.